Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Andrew Kodama, and I'm the director of the Mount Diablo Peace and Justice Center. It's very wonderful to have you all here this morning on a Saturday morning. We're joined by three amazing featured guest speakers, friends of us, who are going to speak about the recent election in Nicaragua and speak about all the certain misinformation that has been spread, as well as their direct eyewitness reports, as we're joined by folks who have direct experience living there and being a part of those communities. So this webinar is organized by the Mount Diablo Peace and Justice Center, the Task Force for the Americas, and the Ecumenical Peace Institute. We had a lot of help from Rick Sterling from the Task Force for the Americas, as well as Carolyn Scar from the EPI. And I'd just like to thank them so much for helping organize and put this together. We have three amazing guest speakers joining us. We're joined by Nan McCurdy, Julie Varghese, and Jerry Condon. And I'll give a short kind of introduction to them before each of their talks. But we're going to start with a video called Bucking the Bully, and that covers the recent election. And I believe Rick will start it off by sharing his screen.
Sino con sangre a lo largo de la historia. Y ahora viene a mi memoria lo que les dijo el más grande héroe de la Segovia.
So I'm here outside of a polling station in Chinandega, Nicaragua, and I must say it just makes me downright angry to see how our leaders have lied to us. It's election day, and today is a Sunday. It's a national holiday, and it's a weekend. They're doing everything they can to make sure that their people vote. The United States, we have our election on a Tuesday, and there's lines around the block, people voting before work, voting after work. There's every barrier created. But here they have a very transparent electoral process. They are trying to get people involved in voting. They are trying to encourage participation. The voting age is 16, so people as young as 16 are able to participate in choosing the leaders of the country. United States, if you so much as question the electoral system, you can have your Facebook taken down, you can have your YouTube channel taken down, you can have your social media censored just for questioning the U.S. electoral process. Hypocrisy from U.S. leaders here. This is a clear and transparent election. People are participating in the voting process. They have all kinds of mechanisms to make sure people aren't voting twice, to make sure that people are able to participate and exercise their right to vote. I mean, this is what we're being told in the United States just isn't true.
bandera azul y blanco que no tiene ni una estrella, por la que un día Sandino enarboló. La roja y negra afuera pueden decir lo que quieran, pero si estás en tierra nica, respeta mi bandera, la bandera azul y blanco que no tiene ni una estrella, por la que un día Sandino enarboló. La roja y negra.
That's what, for our generation, it's important. The example of the life, that everything is possible when you live in a democratic, peacefully country like Nicaragua.
Más salud, más educación y más vivienda para los pobres.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Rick. So now our next speaker will be Julie Varghese. Julie is a coordinator of the Black Alliance for Peace Solidarity Network and editor of the independent publication Toward Freedom. Today she'll be talking about what she's learned from Nicaraguan farmers and what she actually saw on election day. So please, whenever you're ready, thank you so much for joining us. We're really happy to have you here.
Thank you very much. Let me just get this presentation started. All right, so thank you very much for having me here. My name is Julie Varghese, and I'm editor of an independent publication called Toward Freedom. I'm also the coordinator of the Solidarity Network for the Black Alliance for Peace. And so today we're going to talk about election day that the corporate media was spreading. So first, I just want to tell you how I got there, the context of my trip there. So I was on a delegation with the Friends of the ATC Solidarity with Nicaragua delegation. And that was November 2nd to November 9th. And the intention was to, bring people from the United States to learn about the campesinos, their struggle, why they, who they support, why they support the FSLN, and then also to be there to accompany the elections. And it was, I believe, 7 of us traveled in, plus a number of other US citizens and permanent residents who were already there on the ground on the ATC campus, plus others who were like interns from like Honduras and Dominican Republic and the autonomous regions of Nicaragua as well. So this was our group. And the other thing I just wanted to mention was that BAP was there as well. I believe BAP had the biggest delegation from a US organization in Nicaragua. I'm pretty sure about that. We had 5 people officially representing BAP. One of them is not seen here in this photo, but 5 on the BAP delegation, and they went to the South Caribbean autonomous region, to the Bluefields to accompany the elections there. And we also had other people with us who were not part of BAP who were on that trip to Bluefields. But I went to, they ended up meeting with a lot of the Afro-descendant population, leaders, movement leaders, government officials, to learn about the progress that African people have made in Nicaragua under the FSLN government. And they heard only good things about the progress that has been made. So I was on, when I was on the Friends of the ATC delegation, because I was accredited as press, I was put into a different group, and along with Abraham Marquez and Camila Escalante, who were the two other journalists in our delegation for the Friends of the ATC. So we were all in a group that went to Chinandega, which is a city in the Pacific Northwest of Nicaragua. And this year we went to 4 voting centers, and they were all in schools which have open air campuses. So this right here is like the courtyard of the school, and each voting station was in each classroom. So you walk into one room and it's just set up for just you to vote, not for anybody else. And some of the things that we found was that a lot of the things that the corporate media was saying about the process or about the elections were false. The corporate media was saying prior to even election day that it was a sham. So that in and of itself just makes clear their intentions. But it was a very organized process. It was very calm. Nobody complained to us. You know, you could tell by looking at us that we were wearing these vests. We were wearing these brown vests, these beige vests, or tan vests with the caps and the lanyards with our badge on it. Some of us were wearing just the lanyard, and some of us were wearing the whole package with the vest and everything. So everywhere we went, people could tell that we were international election companions. So if they had trouble voting, they could have run up to us and said, "Hey, there's some problems here. Can you please get the word out?" That's, I would think, how it would go if you felt like you were in trouble. But nobody complained to us. Nobody ran up to us. Chinandega is a Sandinista stronghold also. The reason for that was because when the 2018 coup attempt happened, they basically they saw what happened in Managua with all the violence and the disruption and the vandalism and how it disrupted trade and people were killed. And they decided they were not going to have that happen in Chinandega. So they blocked any of the right-wing coup makers from entering and causing disruption. And because of that, they are now a Sandinista stronghold. And also, Chinandega just got a $100 million hospital built in that city or in the region. So they're very proud of this progress that they've had. So we had election officials at every voting station explain to us exactly how voting happens. People have to be registered. They get a separate voter ID that they can only use for voting. And they have a ballot that shows the pictures of all of the presidential candidates, which I've never seen before, and in the United States, along with the flags of each of the political parties. So it's really hard to get confused, unlike in the United States, where you always hear these stories of people saying, "I didn't actually know who I was voting for. I couldn't tell. It was really confusing. The ballot was really confusing." Here, it's like, even if you don't know how to read and write, which, you know, in Nicaragua, they have a high literacy rate because of the Sandinista revolution. But even if you didn't know how to vote, even if you didn't know how to read, you could see the picture of the presidential candidate and move forward from there. So everybody's information as a voter is in computers and also on the wall, printed out on the wall. That bright green paper and the white paper is all voter rolls, so that you can go and look up where, which voting station you vote inside of. And again, we're all wearing these vests, so it's really hard to confuse us with anybody else. So if you had a problem, you could run up to any of us and say, "Hey, this is what's going on." But we actually encountered a very peaceful process. Everybody gets instructions for how to vote. And every time we spoke to somebody, a lot of them had the ink on their thumb that indicated that they voted, and that ink couldn't come off of their thumb and for 48 hours, from what I understand. So it's really hard to do fraud the way people always talk about in the United States happening. And also, it just it's really hard to do that in Nicaragua. So and everybody that we spoke to, they all just praised the process. They were very proud of the process. They, no matter what their political affiliation was, they thought that it was important to demonstrate that they have a democracy in Nicaragua, that they have the right to vote. And the local press was following us around because our group in Chinandega had the largest number of journalists from outside of Nicaragua. So they were just following us everywhere. And I'm sure it happened with other groups, but it was just a little bit different, I thought, with our group, because our group was giving lots of interviews, as well as also recording what was going on. So people saw our cameras and all of our equipment. And it was a kind of like a whirlwind of a morning. And again, it's a very, very peaceful process. And people were just hanging out afterward. After they were voting, they just voted. They were just, if there was a problem, they wouldn't just be sitting around. They would actually be doing something. They would be protesting. They'd be in the streets. So again, more people voting here. And they have a program in place to make sure that people who are disabled have the ability to vote. So they would literally pick people up and put them into a chair, and then pick up that chair to take it up the stairs, take it down the stairs, whatever they needed to do to help the person vote. And that's part of the program of the election workers helping. So you, unlike in the United States, where a lot of people with disabilities and elderly people complain that they cannot access voting, here it's part of the system. It's embedded. So it's impossible to not be able to vote, essentially. And they make it very easy, and they really go out of their way. It was like 3-4 people at a time carrying each elderly person or each disabled person. So I wrote some articles where you can learn more about some of this information. The first one was just kind of laying out my experiences talking to farmers. We visited a farm, and two farms, and I got to be on one of those trips, and they said that they supported the FSLN government because before the FSLN took power, before the Popular Revolution in 1979, they were slaves. They were working as slaves on the land, and now they own that land. They have the deed to that land. And women in Nicaragua get to, they usually are handed the deed to the land they live on if it's a family. It's usually the woman. And similarly, I wrote I wrote part 2 of this series of articles that I was working on about Nicaragua. So this one was specifically about busting myths that the corporate media was spreading. And I included a lot of videos and tweets of people who were accompanying the elections in Nicaragua. And I also participated, my publication, Toward Freedom, participated, and we organized a webinar where we spoke about the need for independent media, why it matters. And in there, I gave a report back about it. And then we also had another member of the delegation of the Friends of the ATC, Abraham Marquez, who's a freelance journalist. He wrote an article on Thursday for Toward Freedom about China and Nicaragua and why Nicaragua chose to recognize one China and their relationship with Taiwan, and also what the impact would be on Nicaragua, according to the people he spoke to. So if you want to read any of these articles or watch this webinar that Toward Freedom did, we also cut it up into chunks. You can go to towardfreedom.org to learn more about that. And if you would like to learn about the Black Alliance for Peace's Nicaragua resources, we have a page, blackallianceforpeace.com/Nicaragua. And I would like to thank you so much for your time.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. I do wish we could actually see the participants because people could clap and we could hear them, see their listening faces and all that. But thank you so much, Julie. That was wonderful. And the photos were really excellent. And it's very helpful. So thank you for that. So our next speaker is Jerry Condon. He is a board member of Task Force in the Americas and the former national president of Veterans for Peace. Today, he'll be talking about his observations witnessing the election on the Caribbean coast, where the Indigenous and African descendant citizens have substantial autonomy. So Jerry, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm very happy to be here with these esteemed and wonderful colleagues. I am a Vietnam era veteran and war resistor, and have been involved with veterans peace organizing for many years. And I want to start out actually by saying a little bit about the involvement of U.S. veterans with Nicaragua. In 1983, when I was working as national coordinator for the National Anti-Draft Campaign, opposing a new round of draft registration, restoral of draft registration, the Veterans for Foreign Wars held their national convention in New Orleans. Their guest speaker was Ronald Reagan, and they announced that they were going to raise $1 million to support the Contras in Nicaragua, who were, actively attacking rural communes and killing a lot of people. And so there were quite a few veterans in the network. The anti-draft network were doing counter-recruitment work. This was prior to the formation of Veterans for Peace in 1985. It was 2 years earlier. And my phone started ringing off the hook from angry veterans around the country who said, the Veterans for Foreign Wars do not represent us. We do not want to see another Vietnam War in Central America. We have to do something. So we did something. We organized the first 2 veterans delegations to Nicaragua in 1983 and 1984. We traveled into the war zones. We then organized, Brian Wilson and others led a Veterans Peace March, actually through part of the war zone in Nicaragua, followed by a Veterans Fast for Life against the Contra War that was held on the steps of the US Capitol. Brian and others, including myself, then formed the Veterans Peace Action Teams. We were actually working up in the war zones, rebuilding schools and clinics that had been destroyed by the Contras. And then we organized a Veterans Peace Convoy to Nicaragua in 1987. It was the first humanitarian aid convoy that was not allowed to leave the US. We had to fight for months just to be able to leave the US with our 38 trucks and 30 tons of aid. Our slogan was feed the children, not the war. It was pretty much a media blackout about this in the United States, but it was huge news in Mexico and Central America. And we were greeted by 10,000 Nicaraguans when we finally made it to Nicaragua. In 2019, just a couple of years ago, Veterans for Peace organized a delegation to visit Nicaragua and to find out what we could about the attempted coup there. We had a very powerful experience, including meeting with the widows of Nicaraguan police who've been killed. 22 police men and women had been killed by the so-called nonviolent protesters on the barricades. And also many had been injured seriously. There were amputations, internal wounds, and blinding. So we saw, and then we also attended the 40th anniversary celebration of the Nicaraguan Revolution. We saw with 400,000 Nicaraguans from all over the U.S., all over the Nicaragua, who were jubilantly rejoicing in their revolution. And So we saw that there was massive support there, contrary to what we see in the US. So I was happy to be able to be part of the recent accompaniment. It was formed by the Nicaraguan Network and Alliance for Global Justice. And I was fortunate enough to be able to be part of the group that went to the Northern Autonomous region on the Caribbean coast, to the town of Bilwi, which is largely a mosquito town. And I'm going to try to see if I can share my screen here and show a few photos from that. And is that working? Okay, I'm playing with this here. I think that we had a little trouble with this earlier. I might have to have Rick Sterling show it.
Yeah, Rick, if you have the PowerPoint, Rick, you can share it. Otherwise, Gary, maybe just Jerry, try slideshow, the top there, the tab slideshow at the top, and then play. So up where it says home, yeah, slideshow, home, insert, slideshow.
Oh, insert.
No, slideshow.
Okay, I don't. My slide. I don't even have slideshow popping up, so I'm afraid I'm gonna have to turn it over to Rick and see if that works.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Rick, you can pull up the slide, Jerry slideshow if you're able to. See.
Jerry, can you stop sharing? Yeah. Oh,
there you go.
Okay, very good.
Sorry for the technical problems, folks.
No problem at all.
Okay.
Thank you, Rick. So Jerry, maybe just say next when you want to go next.
Okay, next. So this is, I think Julie showed this photo too. This is the African American delegation from the US, which includes people from the Black Alliance for Peace and Alliance for Global Justice, and perhaps a few others, except for the gentleman in the middle there, who's Michael Campbell with the Nicaraguan Foreign Ministry. And this group also traveled to the Atlantic coast, but they went to the Southern Autonomous region and visited Bluefields. Next. Here's the entrance to the Bilwi Voting Center. We observed a very orderly process going on at 3 different major voting centers in Bilwi. Thousands of people participated. It was very well organized, very calm. The mood was, I would say, somewhere between solemn and festive, if you can imagine that. Many people were wearing their Sunday best. Well, it was Sunday. Next, Rick, thank you. Here's a typical line there. So these were, this was a school and all the different classrooms were being used. And you can next, please. And they had registration of the names for each classroom where people should go. It was very clear and very orderly. And they had people helping out. Next. Next. Here's one of our election observers. We had our election observer vests, so we were very clearly marked, and we were able to to go anywhere we want to observe this process, including inside the classrooms where the voting was taking place. Next. This was the longest line I saw. You know, people were asking for pictures of long lines to prove that a lot of people were voting. Well, there generally weren't long lines, except very early in the morning when people first arrived, because the process was very quick and orderly. As a matter of fact, the typical line next, next please. Okay, here's inside the classroom. Anyway, typical line was, you know, maybe 10 people or less at each classroom, because of course people voted all day long. We actually timed one person who showed up in line. There was about 8 or 10 people in the line, and we timed him how long it would take, but from the time he came to the line to the time he completed the voting process and came outside, and it was 8.5 minutes, 8 minutes and 40 seconds, I think it was. So it was very quick. Next, please. Next. I'm not going to go through all the many steps they had to make sure that fraud was impossible. Very, very transparent and very secure process. Next. Next. Yes, and they ended up by inking people's thumbs to show that they had voted, and so they couldn't vote twice. Next. Next. So here's a couple of people very proudly showing off their thumbs, as many people did, proud that they had voted in this election. I would say the U.S. Continues to refuse to recognize the Nicaraguan election, and but I would say that the Nicaraguan election would put the U.S. election to shame. There were 6 parties running, sometimes more depending on the region. And there are also multiple parties that formed blocks. There were several different parties that were part of the Sandinista bloc. The parties represented a whole range of political views. There was one person, one vote, with no electoral college. Instead of the voter suppression we see here in the US, Nicaragua proactively registered over 90% of its people. They encouraged people to vote. There were ads on television explaining the process and they made it very clear and easy to vote. As it turned out, in the Northern Caribbean Autonomous Zone, Bilwi, those photos I just showed you are from Bilwi on the northern Caribbean coast, largely a mosquito town. They had the largest percentage of vote for the FSLN, the Sandinista Front, 85%, which is really astounding, although the vote in the entire country was also very large, 75% for the Sandinista Front. So we wondered, why did they have such a huge vote for the Sandinistas on the Northern Autonomous Zone? We were given 3 reasons. One, that people there were very impressed with the proactive actions of the government in response to the 2 hurricanes in 2019. Back-to-back devastating hurricanes within 3 weeks of one another. The authorities saw the hurricanes coming. They proactively evacuated people from the danger zones. There were no deaths directly related to the hurricane, although I think there were several deaths in the country later on that had to do with some of the subsequent flooding. And then the government came in and quickly rebuilt schools and other important buildings that had been destroyed. So people were very impressed with that. They're also very happy that highway is being completed from Bilwi to Managua, which is going to cut the distance down, travel distance dramatically, from I think maybe 24 hours to 12 hours, but I think I heard people can make it in even less time than that. At any rate, they're connecting to the rest of the country, so they're more likely to have visitors, to have tourism, to have be able to sell their goods, and they're very pleased that their relative isolation from the rest of the country is being broken by this highway. And then thirdly, perhaps most significantly, is the fact that they have a very vital autonomy process that's been going on, and the Sandinistas have proactively engaged with, so that 23 original people's territories have been titled and delimited, covering 314 communities with a territorial extension of 38,000 square kilometers, which a population of more than 200,000 people and 35,000 families. The area is equivalent to 31% of the national territory and 55% of Nicaragua's Caribbean coast. So it's really very, very significant. So there's an ongoing process. There's a large amount of autonomy. There's actually 5 different levels of governance, from the very local community through the region and finally to the nation. There's an autonomous university. There's now recently another university that's totally oriented towards indigenous people, including teaching traditional indigenous history and practices. So it's a very, very strong process, and that has, when the Sandinistas were out of power for 17 years, that process flagged and was reversed by the neoliberal government. But since the Sandinistas have been back, it's back on track, and that's why these people are happy to be voted. So next slide, Rick. Are you? All right, Rick, can you give me the next slide and next, please? Okay, so this is a map of Nicaragua and in relationship to the rest of Central America, just so you see where it is. And then next. This is a map of Nicaragua that shows the 2 autonomous zones, the northern autonomous regional zone and the South Atlantic autonomous region. And you can see they make up a very large part of the country. And we were in the northern region there. Next.
Jerry, just a quick check-in. We'll maybe about 3 or 4 more minutes. We'll add some time because of the technical difficulties, but want to make sure Nan has time for her presentation and then also for Q&A. So maybe about 3 or 4 minutes.
Have I gone over time?
A little bit, but partially not your fault, but 3
Okay,
3
I'm just finishing here.
Okay,
this
no
is, I don't know if you want to scroll through this, Rick, but this is a list of U.S. interventions in Latin America. So there's many. The United States has intervened hundreds of times in Latin America, from supporting and orchestrating right-wing coups to 56 outright military interventions. And that has not stopped. The U.S. is still intervening. In 2009, it supported the right-wing coup in Honduras. More recently, it supported the right-wing coup in Bolivia. Thankfully, both of those coups have been overturned by the people. It continues to try to undermine and overthrow the governments of Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. It conducts hybrid warfare, including sophisticated disinformation campaign and deadly US sanctions. US actions in Latin America historically and up to this very moment have been absolutely anti-democratic, have led to hundreds of thousands of murders, rapes, disappearances, and widespread violation of human rights. So when the US President and Secretary of State tell us they are concerned about democracy and human rights in Nicaragua, those are totally ridiculous lies, and we should not be fooled for one moment. US elites are concerned only about continuing US domination and corporate exploitation of Nicaragua and Latin America. They're actually afraid of the good example that Nicaragua is showing to the rest of Latin America and the world. Nicaragua is still the second or third poorest nation in Latin America, yet it is successfully defending its independence from US imperialism. It is developing a robust democratic tradition. It has made dramatic strides lifting people out of poverty. It provides free education, including college and free healthcare for all. It's making major improvements in infrastructure, building more hospitals. I think Nan's going to be talking about that in a minute. Connecting the country with excellent roads, highways, electricity, internet. It is poised to make giant strides in the coming years. It is really a shining example of what is possible. It's a wonderful work in progress, and that is why progressive people in the US and around the world, including US veterans, will continue to support Nicaragua and its unique people's revolution. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was perfect. Thank you, Jerry. Worked out really well. Okay, up next we have Nan McCurdy. Nan is a United Methodist missionary who lived in Nicaragua for decades. And actually was just telling me goes back and forth. We'll be there full-time, I think, in a couple of years, you were saying. But she is editor of the weekly English language newsletter about Nicaragua called NICA Notes. And she'll talk about the changes and developments she's personally seen in the past year. So Nan, take it away.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks everyone for being with us for this end of the year kind of summary on Nicaragua. It looks like we're in for an exciting 2022 also. But I'm going to focus on some of the advances from this year, or how Nicaragua continues to make lives better and recuperate essential rights. In my opinion, the most important advance in Nicaragua in 2021 has been making their sovereignty respected, or as Sandino said, sovereignty is not discussed, it is defended. This is essential for Nicaragua, but also an excellent example for other small nations still treated like colonies by the US and by Europe. Analyst William Grigsby asserts 2021 was the year that Nicaragua began the final offensive to achieve full independence. We have a model of nation building very different from the Yankee model of colony building. The only way we can progress is if we are independent, sovereign, and express self-determination. It's the only way, and this has been proven. In the 17 years between 1990 and 2007, Nicaraguans suffered the pro-Yankee predatory model in which we were effectively annexed to the United States in foreign, in economic, and all policies. We were annexed to the Yankee logic of imperialism, and the result was a social catastrophe, poverty and backwardness in all walks of life. The logic of building a country for everyone did not exist. There were no social rights. The logic was to build a country to serve a few, and even those few were beholden to foreign interests. With our current model, our social rights have been recuperated. If we return to the Yankee colonial model, our social rights will end. Our unique model of development that includes things like empowering small and medium scale producers will end. It is the people who build the nation and who defend a development model that builds social justice to end poverty. On December 9th, as Julie mentioned, Nicaragua reestablished relations with China. The Sandinistas established relations with China in 1979. And then in 1990, the neoliberal government of Violeta Chamorro ended that and established relations with Taiwan. Analyst Oscar Gomez writes, Nicaragua has made a wise decision to establish diplomatic relations with the one and only China. Nicaragua will be able to establish commercial, economic, and social agreements with China for the benefit of the population. This transcendental news for Nicaragua must be understood as a matter of national security for Nicaragua's development. For Nicaragua, investments with China can be projected to modernize the infrastructure of land, air, and port transportation, to increase regional interconnectivity in trade. Foreign Minister Moncada said to China on December 9th, when they reestablished relations, we emphasize the need for mutual respect for sovereignty, non-interference in internal affairs, the dignity and territorial integrity of states, their right to development and to have social security systems, meaning healthcare, education, etc., and to resolve disputes by peaceful means. We reject the threat or use of force as a means of conflict resolution. We reject unilateral coercive measures contrary to international law. We need to urge the international community to foster a new kind of international relation based on mutual respect, equity, justice, and mutually beneficial cooperation. Another important action this year in November is the decision to leave the Organization of American States. This process will take about 2 years. How Nicaragua has made their sovereignty and their laws respected with the United States in regard to US agents is also one of the advances of the year. In early 2021, you still had the Nicaraguan agents of the US on constant trips to Washington to receive their orders, while at the same time, they were continuing to receive millions directly and through their non-governmental organizations, this time for a new coup. These are the same agents who carried out the 2018 US coup, handing out the money and handing out the orders. In June, this pretty much came to a stop with the arrest of Cristiana Chamorro and company for money laundering and other crimes, and later the arrest of others for very serious crimes like treason, acts that are crimes in every nation on earth. In part, what made this possible were new laws at the end of 2020. One of them is similar to the US FARA law. If you receive money from a foreign government, you have to report on it, and they didn't. The population appears very pleased with these actions, as there has not even been one tiny protest, not even from their friends. So let's look a minute at the economy. Central Bank President Ovidio Reyes said the accumulated growth rate up to September is 9.9%. Nicaragua grew by about 5% from 2007 to 2018 until the US coup. It is set to have one of the best growth rates in the Americas this year. Thus far in 2021, there have been record exports. Between January and October, Nicaragua's exports totaled 5.4 billion, 26% more than in 2020. The World Bank and the United Nations Development Program report that employment in Nicaragua has already recovered to pre-pandemic levels. Great news. July 30th, the World Bank said that Nicaragua completed disbursements of 100 million for a disbursement rate of 53%, both the amount and the rate being record figures in the last 10 years and placed Nicaragua among the top 10 in the world. The transparency of Nicaraguan government officials and the satisfaction of the population with public services were highlighted by the Inter-American Development Bank in an August report. The World Bank reported on October 11th that Nicaragua ranks third in the world in electricity generated from renewable sources with 70% production. The report states that since 2007, Nicaragua has implemented an electrification program that tripled energy production from renewables and expanded electricity coverage from just 54% in 2007 to 99% today. It went on to say that in a few years, Nicaragua will overcome dependence on fossil fuels. Nicaragua ranks first in infrastructure investment in Central America. This is from a report by the Strategic Alliance for Measurement of Public Investment and says that Nicaragua ranks first in the region in infrastructure investment. The 2022 budget is aligned with National Program for the Fight Against Poverty and Human Development, which is the new program for the next 4 years. 23% is for education, about that much for health, the rest for social protection programs. Among the priorities are access to quality health services and education at all levels. The fight against poverty also foresees reaching more than 95% food security by 2026. Between 2007 and 2021, the government invested more than $1 billion to bring drinking water and sewage to people as a human right and not as a business. In 2006, only 65% of the urban population had potable water. Today, that is 91.5%. 28 drinking water and sanitation projects were completed this year in 18 cities. The number of sports facilities has doubled since 2007. The plan for building more, they've already built a lot, includes 13 baseball and 13 soccer stadiums, 12 sports centers, 5 major recreational centers like the large Luis Alfonso Velázquez Park in Managua. A new pier in Bilwi was finished in October. The previous one was destroyed by hurricanes in November 2020. And Jerry mentioned this, the first Indigenous agricultural university in Latin America was inaugurated in November. It is in the South Caribbean region. And it's very unique for all of Latin America because it will provide professional training to Indigenous people who were taught to read and write in their mother tongue through the Yo Si Puedo, Yes I Can program, and who have completed their primary and secondary education. A few things about the Signature Health Program. Since November, they are doing house-to-house vaccination. This is especially important in the more remote areas. The population over 30 years of age is 80% covered with the vaccine. And all of this is amazing because they really had not gotten that many vaccines until this fall. And once they finally were getting vaccines, a lot from Cuba, they virtually began an around-the-clock vaccination program everywhere. So it's gone very quickly. They went from about 18% coverage up to about 80% coverage in less than 3 months. In 2021, more than 100 health facilities were built, including 10 hospitals, 6 primary hospitals and 4 departmental hospitals. Another 10 were built or expanded, and I don't even have time to talk about all the health centers and other things. Nicaragua is #1 in the world in women in ministerial positions and is #1 in the Americas in gender equity. And Nicaragua now has 91 women's police stations. In climate news, and I am almost done, Nicaragua was elected vice president of the board of directors of the Conference of the Parties, COP, against climate change, representing Latin America during the UN Climate Change Conference held in Scotland. Climate Change Secretary Javier Gutierrez stated that the unanimous election of Nicaragua to the COP Board of Directors is recognition of its work on issues of climate change adaptation and mitigation, as well as sustainable development with climate justice. And I will end there. Thank you so much.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Nan. Perfect. All our presenters are wonderful, all very perfect on timing. So thank you so much for that. I've been taking questions in both from the chat and the Q&A box. So I have a few questions that I've put onto my notes here, but we did want to say that we'll answer them in the webinar, and then also, if there are any outstanding ones, we can email afterwards all registrants if there's anything outstanding that needs to be addressed. But this first question was for Julie, and someone was asking, in talking with the voters, did you have the impression that their pride in the election process was strong, even if they disagreed with each other on their political views and candidates?
Yes, I did. A number of people did not want to tell me who they voted for. It could be, of course, because there's a law that doesn't allow people to ask other people who they voted for. But there was also a video that Friends of Latin America's Jill Clark Golub, she took a video of 2 opposition party election monitors who told her that they were proud of their process. They wanted to demonstrate their democracy, and they spoke against and rejected the people who were the coup mongers from 2018, and also rejected any US meddling, including sanctions. And the same goes for every party got to have a representative from their party monitor the election, the vote counting. So everything was very transparent. And if people from other parties didn't oppose the whole process, they wouldn't even be a part of the vote counting, for example.
Excellent, thank you. This one is for Nan. You did speak about it a little bit, and I did see it addressed in the chat during the presentation, but could you touch on the claims that presidential candidates were put into prison and kind of just clarify that one more time, the context for that?
Sure. The people who were investigated, accused, indicted, and now are awaiting trial, none of them were presidential candidates. This is an invention of the United States government and the US corporate press. You know, it's really just like saying, I want to be a presidential candidate, which is, you know, that's about how much of a presidential candidate these people were. None of them were members of a political party. You have to be a member of a political party to be able to be a candidate. None of the political parties had shown any interest in having any of the people be candidates. There are a lot of other things I could tell you, but I'm not really sure it's worth the time.
That's
You
fine.
know, it's just been it's been the big US lie, I think, really to do what it's done, which it discounted the elections 2 months before the election. And it's continuing to say, oh, the elections are fraudulent. And why? Because they would have liked to have their person as a candidate. And the reality is that the opposition has been very disorganized since 2018, fighting over things like if they could form a party, who would be the candidate. They couldn't even get it together to form a party, and it's like not real hard to form a party.
This question is for all three panelists, but maybe we could start with Jerry. Someone was wondering what kind of pushback is coming from the Sandinistas and the Nicaraguan government themselves to counter Western propaganda. What have you heard?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot going on that I don't know about, but I would say the fact that in these elections invited activists and independent media from all over the world to be there. And there were several hundred of us all told, including about 30 some from the US. I think it was very important that we are able to get the word out, even though it's an uphill battle trying to overcome all the disinformation that's routinely broadcast in almost every corporate media. Nonetheless, I think it really made a big difference. And of course, the government of Nicaragua encouraged and facilitated our presence there. So that's one part of the answer. And the others, I'm not sure. Maybe Nan has something. Maybe Julie.
I agree with. I mean, just having such a great, transparent election is a big thing. Then all of their programs that have garnered them a very high approval rating among the population, that's all continuing. That will all expand next year. And then I have to think that this relationship with China is going to provide them with some protection.
Julie, do you have any thoughts?
Sorry, can you just read?
Yeah, sure. So someone was wondering what kind of pushback maybe is coming from the ground in Nicaragua to the kind of Western propaganda. Jerry had mentioned welcoming independent journalists and documenting what's been going on. But was there anything you noticed or would like to speak about?
They have a very organized population. So everybody's in organizations. They had young communicators who a lot of them were kicked off of Facebook and Twitter right before the election. But I mean, they're an organized population, so they'll just keep going and try different ways to get their message across. But I think the most important thing is that the population in Nicaragua is that they are able to get the right message out to the population on the ground there.
Yeah.
Not much about what we anywhere else outside of Nicaragua think, because the revolution can be subverted just by people there, you know, taking action. So as long as people there are correctly, you know, have the correct information and political inclination, then it wouldn't be a problem to defend.
That makes sense. Thank you. That's a great point. Thank you. I did want to say, so we are wrapping up the presentation at 11:15, but there will be a recording of this webinar available afterwards, so it can be widely shared. And all the materials that you saw in the presentations today will be made available to the participants. So thank you for that. Let's see here. This is a question for everybody. Yes. What is the nature of the autonomous zones? Are these ethnic minority regions? Was a question from Mike.
Go ahead, Jerry.
I'll turn it over to you, Nan, since you know better than I.
So the Caribbean coast is a historically marginalized area. For many years, it was controlled by the British. The Sandinistas in the 80s created an autonomy process, dividing the Caribbean coast in a northern and a southern region, and developing the autonomy process with the people there. There actually are, I think, 7 different indigenous or Afro-Caribbean groups on the Caribbean coast. This is now a very full established autonomy. There's a lot more. Jerry, jump in. I'm blanking. Oh, I probably the most important thing this year is that they finished titling all of the land to the people on the Caribbean coast. So you're talking almost 1/3 of Nicaragua is now titled to people, families in more than 315 communities of thousands of square kilometers. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, well, I would just add maybe that, yes, there are different ethnic groups, and these are a variety of distinct indigenous cultures. And I would say that historically, the CIA has been very, very experienced at exacerbating contradictions among groups, and they've certainly tried this during the Contra War to turn indigenous populations against the Sandinistas, but I think that that's going to be much more difficult now. Even so, even though Nicaragua probably can claim to have better progress addressing the autonomy demands of its indigenous peoples than probably any country in Latin America, even so, we still hear this propaganda coming out from various places about how the Sandinistas are encouraging mestizo farmers to invade mosquito territories, and people are being killed. And well, there is some conflict there. There are some contradictions, and some of these are, according to Myrna Cunningham, who we spoke to in Bilwi, some of these are actually being actively encouraged, these conflicts, by groups that are receiving U.S. monies. And some arms have been given to mosquitoes, and some violent conflicts have occurred. There are still some contradictions that need to be worked out, but there is active participation from all the indigenous groups and from the FSLN in addressing these contradictions. And so when you read in the paper, or you see something from the Oakland Institute that says, oh, those bad Sandinistas are murdering the indigenous people again, you can be pretty sure that's just another part of decades of CIA provocation and disinformation.
Thank you. We are, if I am just paying attention to the time, it is 11:15, so if folks do need to leave, thank you so much for attending, but we will take, we do about 5 more minutes, if that's okay. Just wanted to see if any of our panelists wanted to mention anything about anything coming up for them or their work, or their organizations they work for, or any last words from our panelists.
I just wanted to say that Black Alliance for Peace has been focusing on the Americas region over the past year. People may know back for its work on AFRICOM, so it's been also now moving into America's work, meaning we have lots of relationships with different organizations in different countries in the Americas. And so we've been consolidating. We've created a solidarity network for an Afro-Colombian solidarity network, and doing a lot of Haiti solidarity work. And it's going to continue into next year. And the reason for that is because 80 million Africans live in the Americas. It's outside of Africa, it's the American region. So Nicaragua falls right into that work. So you can expect to see more work coming out of the Black Alliance for Peace on all of that. And you know, in total, all of our structures are probably represent a couple of thousand people in our structures, our networks. So that we're just going to be continuing that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Nan?
If you aren't already signed up for NICA Notes, please go to Alliance for Global Justice and look for any NICA Notes article. And up on the right, you can subscribe yourself. The Nicaraguan Network, which is part of the Alliance for Global Justice, will be hosting a number of delegations this year, and we hope you and your friends will join these delegations and go experience it all for yourself. Thank you. Thanks to all of you for inviting me.
Jerry?
Well, just to say, it's so great to be shoulder to shoulder with Black Alliance for Peace. They're doing really outstanding work, and their involvement with Nicaragua is making a big difference. Also, I think it's great that Nicaraguan Network of Alliance for Global Justice will be organizing several delegations. Actually, there's a delegation getting ready to go down soon to participate and be present for the inauguration ceremony on January 10th. And there'll be several other delegations following up throughout the year. So people who want to check that out should go to afgj.org. And also want to thank the Task Force on the Americas, which has been sending a number of people. I'm happy to be on the board there now. We had several people who have been on recent delegations to Nicaragua and will be going again soon. In fact, I think Rick Sterling, who's with us here, is going to be attending the inauguration. So there's lots of good work and good solidarity to come. Lots of opportunities to get involved and to build a really important movement for peace and solidarity in this United States as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. So that is it for today. Thank you so much, everybody. Again, this will be shared to everybody via email. And just to close, Daniel Zwickel has shared with us some music. So I'll play that as people exit the room, so we can hear that. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.